أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. And welcome back to Etiquettes with the Qur'an. Today we will learn some of the basic etiquettes of Quranic recitation. We have already learned that integral to the definition of the Qur'an is that it is ritualized through its recitation. In this regard, the Qur'an says, "And when the Qur'an is recited, give ear to it and pay heed that you may obtain mercy." We also saw how rewards are multiplied for Quranic recitation. We learn from this verse that God also blesses the one who listens attentively with mercy. According to one prophetic tradition, no people gather in the house of God, reciting God's book and studying it among themselves, except that tranquility descends upon them, mercy covers them, the angels encircle them, and God mentions them with those who enjoy his presence. This hadith strongly supports the view of the many scholars who permit synchronized recitation of the Qur'an, for it states that the purpose of such gatherings are to recite and study the book of God. So there's reward for reciting, listening to, reading, and studying the book. When the Qur'an is being recited, one should not talk, laugh, clamor, or engage in any vain activities. These are all deemed irreverent acts in light of the Quranic prescription to remain silent and attentive during its recitation. And because distracting behaviors like these are common in marketplaces, they are not ideal locations for the recitation of the Qur'an. A special custom of reciters is prostration. While chiding unbelievers, the Qur'an says, "And when the Qur'an is recited to them, they do not prostrate." Muslim scholars state that there are between 11 to 15 places marked in the Qur'an which warrant a special prostration. Most scholars consider it highly recommended to prostrate at these points, while others deem it to be compulsory. This recommendation not only applies to reciters but to listeners as well. The first etiquette of recitation is that one be in a state of ritual purity. Ritual purity entails the removal of major ritual defilement, which typically occurs through intercourse or menstruation. Touching the mushaf is not allowed while major defilement persists, and a special shower called ghusl is required to remove major defilement. Passing wind and answering a call of nature places one in a state of minor ritual defilement, which is removed through lustrations called wudu. Scholars differ, however, about the permissibility of touching the Qur'an without lustrations due to minor defilement. The Qur'an says, "This is a noble Qur'an and a concealed record which none touch save the purified." Proper purification includes cleansing the mouth through brushing the teeth or other forms of fumigation. One should also choose a clean place to sit, like in a mosque or dedicated prayer space for one's reading and recitation. Once clean, you're ready to recite. The first etiquette in recitation is the ta'awudh. The ta'awudh or isti'adha is to say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim." I take refuge with God from Satan the accursed. The Qur'an advises, وَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. And when you recite the Qur'an, seek refuge with God from the accursed Satan. Another version of the ta'awudh is أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ السَّمِيعِ الْعَلِيمِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. Or I take refuge with God, the all-hearing, the all-knowing, from Satan the accursed. After reciting the ta'awudh, one recites the basmala if one is starting recitation at the beginning of a surah. The basmala is to say, "Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim," in the name of God, all compassionate, all merciful. Note, however, that if one is beginning the recitation at a point within a surah, the reciter merely needs to recite the ta'awudh without the basmala. Once recitation has commenced, a reciter is advised to try to maintain focus and reflect deeply on the meaning of what he is saying if he understands Arabic. The Qur'an says, will they not then ponder on the Qur'an? To ponder on the meanings of the Qur'an is one of the primary reasons for its revelation. God says, it is a book we have revealed to you in order that you ponder on its verses. According to the sage Ibrahim al-Khawas, 5 things heal the heart: reading the Qur'an with deep reflection, an empty stomach, the night visual prayer, earnest supplication prior to daybreak, and keeping company with the righteous. The primary goal of proper focus and deep reflection on the meanings of the Quranic verses is for them to penetrate the heart. The most impressive recitations are those conducted by a skilled reciter with a beautiful voice. Such recitations often bring listeners to tears even when they don't understand what is being said. Crying is itself an important etiquette of reading the Quran. That may sound strange since crying is generally an organic reaction to beauty. Nevertheless, crying during recitation is prescribed and reports of dubious authenticity despite Islam's condemnation of pretension and ostentation. According to scholars, crying opens the door to divine gifts. Consequently, some collectors report the Prophet as having said, read the Quran and cry, and if you cannot cry, make yourself cry. In the view of Al-Ghazali, what aids in crying is calling to mind the many ways we have failed God and the fact that we have not lived up to the pact we have made with Him. One should consider the divine threats of punishment and the rewards we forfeit in falling short of God's commandments. If none of this makes us sad enough to cry, then we should cry because we lack remorse. To feel no shame, no guilt, nor fear of any consequence for our misdeeds is itself the worst of all afflictions. Recitation of the Qur'an has particular rules. The rules of proper recitation are called Tajweed or elocution. As already stated, the speed of recitation and the beauty of the reciter's voice can influence how much a listener is affected. Reciting the Qur'an in any way we can has its own merits. However, nothing is more beautiful than when the reciter applies the rules of Tajweed and also possesses a beautiful voice. The Prophet, God's blessing and peace on him, said, Zaytuna College bi aswatikum. Beautify the Qur'an with your voices. One speed and style of recitation is called Tartil. Tartil is a slow melodic recitation. The reciter gives every letter its right, pronouncing each of them from its point of articulation. This is the way the Prophet Muhammad was instructed to recite the Qur'an. He reportedly said, Laysa minna man lam yataghanna bil Qur'an. Whoever does not sing the Qur'an is not one of us. And according to the great Quranic scholar of recitation, Ibn al-Jazari, الأخذ بالتجويد حتم لازم من لم يجود القرآن آثم بأنه به الإله أنزل وهكذا منه إلينا وصل. The application of Tajweed is a duty. Whoever does not apply Tajweed to the Quran is sinful, because God revealed it in that way, and in this way it has come to us from Him. The Prophet's cousin, Ibn Abbas, said, I prefer to recite with Tartil than to recite the Quran in its entirety without it. His student Mujabid ibn Jabr, when asked, stated that if 2 prayers are of the same length, it is better to recite Surah Al-Baqarah with Tartil than to combine Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran without it. This is because Tartil is ideal for reflection. When praying Tahajjud, the Prophet was paused to supplicate after reciting certain verses. If a verse promised a reward and mercy for a certain act, he would supplicate God for that reward or mercy. And when a verse mentioned punishment for a misdeed, he would pause and seek refuge from chastisement. This practice is recommended during Tahajjud and when a person is reading the Quran outside of prayer for devotional reasons. Scholars recommend saying, Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyah or ma'afat min kulli makruh. O God, I ask you for well-being or healing from every displeasure. Once the close companion Hudayfa spent the night with the Messenger of God, God's blessing and peace on him. When the Messenger stood up to pray Tahajjud, Hudayfa joined. In the first unit, the Prophet recited verses from Surah Al-Baqarah, the longest surah of the Quran. Hudayfa said to himself, he will recite 100 verses and then bow. But the Prophet continued until he completed all 286 verses. Without a break, he recited Surah An-Nisa and then Surah Ali Imran in their entirety before bowing in transition to the second unit of prayer. Hudayfa observed that whenever he passed by a verse glorifying God, he stopped to glorify God. When he passed by a verse encouraging him to ask for something, he paused and he asked for it. And when he passed by a petition for refuge from harm, he paused to seek refuge from that harm. The Prophet sometimes prayed until daybreak. Sometimes he prayed half the night. Sometimes he prayed a third of the night. As a result, his legs would swell and his feet would crack. However, unlike the rest of us, prayer to him, God's blessing and peace be on him, was a source of great comfort and delight. His wife Aisha pleaded that all this standing and loss of sleep were needless punishment to his body, since God had already forgiven him for anything he might do in the future. To this he replied, then should I not be a grateful servant? The Prophet Muhammad, God's blessing and peace on him, would sometimes ask his companions to recite the Qur'an to him. On one occasion, he made such a request of one of his star students, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Astonished by the request, Ibn Mas'ud said, do you want me to recite it when it was you to whom it was revealed? He replied, I love to hear others recite it. According to Ibn Mas'ud, I recited to him Surah An-Nisa until I came upon this verse. So how will it be when we bring forth every nation with a witness, and we bring you forth against these as a witness? At this point, he said, you can stop now. When I looked at him, I noticed tears streaming from his eyes. As stated before, the Prophet said, the people of the Qur'an are God's people and his elect. He also said, the best of you are those who learn the Qur'an and teach it. The Qur'an is a book of eternal guidance revealed to the final messenger sent to mankind. It is a book whose blessedness any truth seeker can discern. It is the lasting miracle of the Prophet Muhammad and the irrefutable proof against humanity. It is a book deserving special reverence, part of which is the belief that it is God's revealed word, unparalleled in its eloquence, not resembling the words of any human being. No one in creation can mimic his words. And the recitation of those words demands special etiquettes, focus, and reflection. In addition to approaching the Qur'an in a state of ritual purity, special qualifications are required to properly interpret its words, laws, ethics, parables, and similitudes. Even for those who memorize it are obligated to do their utmost to retain it. For to forget a verse is said to be a grave sin. God says in the Qur'an, and we send down from the Qur'an what is a healing and mercy for the believers, while it only increases the wrongdoers in loss. It is a book of guidance for those who seek guidance, but it is a source of damnation for wretched, vicious souls. For this reason, the Prophet, God's blessing and peace be on him, said, God elevates people by this pronouncement and debases others by it. That notwithstanding, for those committed to the study and recitation of the Qur'an, there are immense rewards and merits. And during the choicest times to recite it, rewards are multiplied. Those times include the month of Ramadan, especially the last 10 days of the month, with the odd nights being the most meritorious. Other recommended times include the first 10 days of the month of Dhul Hijjah, the day of Arafah, Fridays, after the daybreak prayer, and during the night when everyone is asleep. A goal of many Muslims is to read 1/30th of the Qur'an each day during the month of Ramadan. If that proves difficult, read any portion of it that is easy for you. Recite Surah Yasin, Waqi'ah, and Mulk regularly. And on Fridays, recite Surah Al-Kahf. Before sleeping, recite Al-Fatiha, Ayatul Kursi, Surah Al-Falaq, and Surah Al-Nas. Do the same in the morning or any time during the day. Commit to memorizing a certain portion of the Qur'an every week, every month, or every year, while considering the following words of the messenger, God's blessing and peace on him. The likeness of the believer who reads the Qur'an is as the citron. Its scent is delightful, and its taste is delightful. The likeness of the believer who does not read the Qur'an is as the date. It has no scent, and its taste is delightful and sweet. The likeness of the hypocrite who reads the Qur'an is as the basil. Its scent is delightful, but its taste is bitter. And the likeness of the hypocrite who does not read the Qur'an is as the wild gourd fruit. It has no scent, but its taste is bitter. The Prophet Muhammad, God's blessing and peace on him, likewise said, it will be said to the companion of the Qur'an, read, ascend, and recite as you used to recite in the world, for your status is determined by the final verse you recite. Iqra, warqa, ورتل كما كنت ترتل في الدنيا فإن منزلتك عند آخر آية تقرأها. May God make us companions of the Qur'an and believers who are the likeness of the citron, whose scent and taste are delightful. This is Dr. Abdullah Ali, Associate Professor of Islamic Law at Zaytuna College. We thank you for taking part in this special program during this blessed month. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you and guide you. Please don't forget to support Zaytuna College. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abound you with his blessing and your protection. And we look forward to having you join us once again in the future. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.